it's Ann Eileen Thompson. Welcome back to the Faith-Driven Leader Podcast, where we equip and embolden and encourage one another toward a career and a life that's really built on deep, deep trust in our good Father God. I am so excited to have Bob Goff back on the show today. If you missed our first conversation, go back and listen to it. It was amazing. We'll have a link in the show notes so you can go back and easily find that previous episode. But today we're going to be talking about Bob's new book. It's actually a devotional. It's called Chasing Whimsy, 365 Days of Possibility. If you have not heard of Bob, you might have been living under a rock, but let me give you some background on him. Bob is a New York Times bestselling author. He wrote a book called Love Does, another one called Everybody Always, another one called Dream Big, a book called Undistracted. Just so many amazing books. There's a bunch of other books as well. He's a lover of balloons and cake pops and everything fun and everything joyful. He loves to help people pursue big dreams. And he would tell you that his biggest ambitions in life are to love people and to do stuff, and really also just to hold hands with his wonderful wife, sweet Maria, and spend time with their incredible family that seems to always be growing. You know, Bob has been captivating audiences with a very unique storytelling style on places like Good Morning America and NPR and so many more. He's written articles and contributions for publications like Forbes and Relevant. He's been featured as a guest speaker on radio shows and all kinds of podcasts, including ours, obviously, and he actually hosts his own wildly popular podcast as well. I really encourage you to listen in on that. There is so much more that I could say about Bob and how fun and engaging and wise he is. You are going to want to get your hands on his latest book, Chasing Whimsy. After you hear this conversation, for sure you're going to want to get your hands on that book. So let's dive into my conversation with Bob Goff. Well, hey, Bob, thank you so much for coming back for your second episode of the Faith-Driven Leader Podcast. I'm just so excited to have you back on the show.
You bet. Thanks a million for having me. It's good to see you.
Yeah, well, I'm so excited about your new book, Catching Whimsy, and I've had a chance to kind of thumb through it a little bit already, and I'm so excited for folks to be able to see it. But I'd love for you, give us a little bit of backstory on this book. It's a little different than your other books. Tell us, why did you write this Catching Whimsy book right now? Give us the backstory.
Yeah, I think sometimes people just need a little nudge in the morning to get them kind of pointed in the right direction. There's just a lot of anxiety in the ventilation system. And so to just kind of tap that down a little bit, I thought, knowing that the events that the world would be facing would be challenging, I thought, what if we just do something to tap people on the shoulder, remind them who they are, remind them why they're there. And it's a book about if faith guides your steps. It's got some scripture that ties into the ideas if you want to go a little bit deeper. And if you're just the guy at the tire store and you just want some encouragement for the day, it's story driven. It isn't information about like what this word means in Greek or about somebody I've never met before. It's just stories of things that happened. They got me wondering, and it got me thinking about this, and maybe just that idea of entering into each day, if you wanted, with just this positive thought to think, I wonder how I'm going to deal with people who are a little bit difficult. What do I do when people are kind of prickly? What do I do if I have some questions like this dad in Mark 9? He said, I believe, just help me with all the parts I don't believe right now. And I think we've all felt that at one time or another. And so what do we do when that happens?
Yeah, indeed. You know, it's so funny, Bob. Every time I get any kind of devotional book, the first thing I do is I go to my birthday.
Yeah.
And I look at
Great.
what's the devotional for my birthday? My birthday's in April, and we're recording this the day after the election. There's a lot of prickly people out there today.
A
There's a
little
lot
bit
of
of tension in the air system.
little tension. And the entry for my birthday in April was all about turning negativity, like finding the positive and not letting negative words come out of our mouth. And I thought, you know, even though that was written for my birthday, I feel like it was really appropriate to read for today. And I really like the format of the scripture verse and then your stories. You always have such great stories.
I think that's it. We always remember stories. It said Jesus never spoke to anybody without telling them a couple stories. And I get why, because we bring our own life experiences. Now, if you're writing a book and telling people what they should think and why they should think it, what they should do and why they should do it, then you don't need a story. That's just a bunch of facts. But if we want to draw people into saying, hey, where do you go from here? When it gets a little crazy, what do you do? How do you deal with this thing about loving your enemy, which is real easy to do until you have an enemy, until you find
Right.
somebody really up in your grill. So you can agree and say, yeah, we ought to all love our enemy. Mostly other people ought to love theirs.
Right.
Say when it gets deeply personal, like what do you do with that? And when relationships get a little wonky, what are you going to do with that? And when
Yeah.
you're confronted with, it seems like this binary choice, either this or that, to wonder, I don't know, maybe it isn't binary at all. Maybe
Yeah.
there's this and that, and there's everything in between.
All the stuff in between, all the stuff in between. Well, I was thinking about the word whimsy, Bob.
Yeah.
And this podcast, we have a lot of kind of business leaders listening to this podcast. And I'm going to confess that when I was kind of working full time in the marketplace, the word whimsy felt a little frivolous to me, a little kind
Yeah.
of unnecessary.
Yeah,
But
like unicorns and confetti and all that.
yeah, but
Yeah.
why is whimsy so important? Because I know that this is a deep-seated truth that you live by, that joy and laughter and whimsy are necessary. Convince us why they're necessary.
Yeah. So I won't try to convince anybody. Everybody can draw their own conclusion. But I'll tell you this, I've never met somebody that starts seeing the world through kind of a prism of gray and dark and all that. I've never met that courageous person. I've met a lot of people that are observers, but the people that are like down on the field, like the whole reason you're doing this podcast, you want to release beautiful things into the world. And so as a trial lawyer, I mean, I'd tried death penalty cases against witch doctors who sacrifice kids. I mean, it
Wow.
does not get any more heavy than that. And before that, all these trials against, there could be 50 law firms on the other side. So it's not about being silly because I'm not a silly guy. I'm a happy guy. But that idea of whimsy is, think of whimsy as this veneer that's an authentic veneer, but nevertheless a veneer of joy, and underneath that is a mile of strategy. Kind of, if you've ever seen when you were in junior high school or elementary school and they sliced the earth in half and they
Yeah.
said, here's the crust. And while it feels really thick, like compared to everything else, it looks pretty thin. And so really the place that we're standing can feel like pretty thick, pretty heavy. Underneath that is a mile of strategy. You know why you're doing what you're doing. And then you get stuff done. You don't just all keep it up in your head. That's what people in the marketplace do. They make moves.
Yeah.
And a movement is just a bunch of people making similar moves in
Yeah.
that direction. But we're not trying to organize this around a position or a person other than Jesus to say, well, whatever your faith tradition, whatever your background, all the above, none of the above, some of the above, to say, what if we reset, take a hard look at why we're doing what we're doing, and then say if there's some mid-course corrections to make those. Somebody asked Neil Armstrong, how'd you get to the moon? He said 1,000 mid-course corrections. And I would say that's how I make it through every week. It's just 1,000 mid-course corrections. Sometimes a perspective has the ability to lift our eyes from whatever's stressing us out. And then we can walk in with a little bit more courage than we thought. It was because somebody tapped us on the shoulder and say,
Yeah.
you got this. Like, remember, it's not just blowing sunshine at people. It's like holding up a mirror and saying, I see who you are. I know who you
Yeah.
are before you started.
Yeah.
I know who you are after you screwed up. But we're not defined by our best day or our worst day. We say, like, I heard somebody describe a strategy of spending 15% of your time each day planning for the last 15% of your life. And that would see if you're 20 years old, that would be hard to get your arms around. But at 65, I can see it. It's coming
Yeah.
to you. And I want to do things, not that just work. That was like 20-year-old Bob and 30 and 40. Will it work? And now I want the defining question to say, will it last? And you can
Yeah.
find things at work that don't last. But you very rarely find things that are really lasting that don't work. If it's
Wow.
lasting, love and kindness and joy and engagement and showing up and availability, like those things last. And those are our legacy. I want to spend 15% of each day and Most of us work 10-hour days, so about an hour and a half. Just think it through, okay, what do I want to be remembered for? We're going to be known for our opinions, but we're going to be remembered for our love. And I want us to live strategically that way.
I really like that. And even that distinction of just because it works doesn't mean it's going to last. And how do we focus on what's going to
Look,
last?
look at pet rocks. Those worked for a while. Everybody thought like, hey, I'm paying $15 for a rock. It didn't last.
It didn't last. It didn't last. You know, for you as a leader, Bob, I mean, you lead a good sized organization still today. I mean, you've been a leader for a long time. How does whimsy and humor and joy play a role in your leadership
Yeah.
day
I'll
to
give you a
day?
great example of that. I'm the consul for Uganda, so I spent a lot of time back and forth from the US to Uganda. And maybe 20 years ago, we started a school there. And that started with 9 kids and now has like 1,500 kids. At the school,
Amazing.
we thought, let's build a university. And my worst subject in school was school. I don't know anything about universities. But just like people in the marketplace do, you find people who are really good at building universities. And we got all the entitlements we needed. Then I went to the first lady of Uganda. I let her know a couple of years ago what we were planning, and every year I check back in her. That's that idea in the business world of just maintaining relationships. And there's nothing on the other side of the equal sign. It's just maintaining relationships with people that have the power and authority to get stuff done. But I thought a university would be, I don't know, it just seems a little dry. So I thought, let's build a zoo. Turns out you can't call it a zoo, it's a habitat. I'm like, whatever. So I decided, like, what animal could we get that doesn't bite people and is hard to lose? And I'm like, giraffes. So 2 weeks ago, I met with the first lady. I told her not about the university, I told her about the giraffes. And she ran across their version of the White House to get her husband, the president, bring him back. And for the next hour, we just talked about giraffes.
Oh my
That's
gosh.
the idea of strategic whimsy, and he owns them all, 2,740. And I'm like, I just need six.
Wow.
And so now they have 2,734. So what I want us to do
Wow.
is start thinking in ways that engage people. And if facts
Mm.
do not engage people, facts are important. I want my surgeon to know where my kidneys are, but the facts don't draw people in. And so what I want us to do is bring that little creativity, that childlike faith, not childish, because I know a lot of childish people that don't get things done, but that childlike wonder to say, let's talk more about the giraffes than the university. It's a $40 million university, so it's not a small undertaking, but I'm talking about 6 giraffes. And it's a much more winsome conversation to have, along with the important conversation at the university. But university alone, that would be a bunch of people sitting in a boardroom.
Yeah.
But a conversation about giraffes poking their heads in through the like biology class window, like that rocks. And then we started thinking about, could we take some of these kids that don't want to go to higher education but want to do hospitality, and what if we build a hotel? So that's the next call, to say,
Wow.
rather than me figuring it out, I could make a peanut butter sandwich, but to find somebody who's actually really good at that in Uganda. And so maybe marshaling in the marketplace, people
Yeah.
who are really good, and people who thrive in the marketplace and viable are good about making connections, not just relational connections, but logical connections between this and this and this and this and this. And then all of a
Yeah.
sudden you look up and you got a university, you got 6 giraffes, and you got kids going from diapers to doctorate.
That's amazing.
That is going to last.
Yes, that's amazing. How do you inspire the leaders under you to kind of walk in the same level of joy and fun and creativity that you bring all the time?
Yeah, well, I'm just thinking about that we don't need more information, we need more examples. And so I
Mm.
could call it in from San Diego and say, hey, everybody, let's go. I could try to call somebody on a conference call and talk about drafts, or you could go and get off the plane. And there's something about showing up, about being available, about being there. So that's what I would say also to business leaders, is the power of availability,
Mm.
to be constantly interrupted. I put my cell phone number in the back of 3 million books, and I get a lot of phone calls. I mean, this thing's been going off even while we're talking. But the whole idea is to be available in ways that you can be available. So I don't have long conversations with somebody who calls, but they'll call and just 2 days ago, someone's in hospice and having their
Mm,
kind of last time, and they've been reading through the book, and they called up to just say, wow, we like the book and we saw your phone number. So it's just a really tender moment. And other times you have people that are nuts and they just call. I can get a call at 2 in the morning. And if somebody calls at 2 in the morning, they're either really desperate or totally wasted. It's one of the two. It's definitely, you can usually tell if it's door number one or door number two.
pretty
And
quickly, probably. Yeah.
yeah. And so what you would do, I'm no psychologist, but what I would have people do is, hey, look around the room and tell me what you see. Do you see safe people? Do you see, is there any self-harm, or are you on the edge of something steep right now? And if you are, could we phone somebody? Let's just merge in 911. You're not in trouble, but I'm in San Diego, so I'm 1,800 miles away. And we could have somebody there in minutes just to be your friend. Um,
Yeah.
if they wave off on that, as they often do, I'll just say, hey, give me a call tomorrow at 10:15 in the morning. And the reason is most people just need some sleep and they need something to look forward to. And so there's
Yeah.
something beautiful. So I'll set my alarm at 10 o'clock to make
Yeah.
sure I've cleared the decks at 10:15. And there's something really beautiful when we start knowing why we're doing what we're doing. Then all of a sudden, this idea of a life of whimsy isn't about confetti and silly stuff and pranks. It's about, no, it's deeply laden and founded in meaning and purpose and legacy, in availability. So it's all those things that are actually going to
Yeah.
last.
Yeah. That's so inspiring, Bob. And the idea of why, for you, why you're doing what you're doing, or for me, why I'm doing what I'm doing is deeply rooted in faith and why I believe, right, that I'm here. And I'm curious for you, like, how do you think about the connection between your faith and why you're doing what you're doing?
Yeah, well,
How would you
that would
articulate
be,
that?
yeah, a huge motivator. Sometimes our faith communities, it's just because it's made up of such flawed people like me, and um, but sometimes we have the darndest spokesman for faith. They just do stupid things or say stupid things, and you go like, it just feels like this home invasion. Be like, I don't think that's how it works in this house, but and yet there they are. And it's sometimes really off-putting for people both
Yeah.
within a faith community and outside, because they go like, "What are you guys smoking? Like, you're saying this on the one hand, and you're
And you're
doing
doing
that,
that. Yeah.
and I mean, it comes quite honestly. That was Paul. I said, I keep doing what I don't want to do. I don't do what I do. That's just Tuesday and Wednesday and Thursday and Friday for me. But I've learned to mask that a little bit better with my people skills than some people have. So what I'm trying to do is not talk me or anyone else into or out of anything. There's a
Mm,
great discussion. It's in Matthew 16 between Jesus and one of the guys that he's with, Simon Peter, and he says, so who does everybody say I am anyway? And I think there's a lot of people through the ages that have been asking that question. And Simon Peter said, well, some say you're a teacher, and he was all of that. He was a great teacher. And he said, well, some people say you're a prophet, and he was actually that too. But then he said, I think you're God. And Jesus's response, don't tell anybody.
yeah.
I
Yeah.
love it. All my evangelical friends of mine are just thrown. But then the next clarifying verse, it says, flesh and blood doesn't reveal it to you. It's the Spirit of God does. And so, in answer to your question, I think that our job is to love people, and God's job is to let people know who He is. I'm not trying
Yeah.
to be like say something snippy at the water fountain, or drop some flyer somewhere and think, I'm doing the Lord's work. That's just littering. Be
Right.
snippy. What I want us to do is just show up authentically with all of our picadillos, show up with an agenda for ourselves, but not an agenda for everybody else. So
Yeah.
my agenda, even like you could be running a small country, my agenda is to show up for you because you were nice enough to invite me, and to show up authentically, not being distracted. Wouldn't it be lame if I was looking off to the left the whole time? And you're
Right.
like, dude, are you here or there? Just like pick one.
Yeah.
Instead, that we show up and we show up fully. And then for the people that are working beside you, underneath you, above you, without regard to what your status is in the marketplace compared to theirs, you just show up, and you'll know if you treat the guy at the corner store the same way you treat the guy in the corner office. Because if
Yeah.
you do, then you're like, that's a good gut check. If you're
Yeah.
respectful, if you take an interest, if you ask the guy in the corner office or gal and to say, like, how's the golf game, how are the kids, all that, then let's make sure we're asking the guy at the corner store, the person that planted the food, grew the crops, bagged the groceries, like that kind of thing. And that isn't this kind of like progressive, whatever. I don't know. Everybody wants to put labels on things. That's just being nice.
It's just being
Uh,
authentic and kind.
yeah,
Yeah.
there's
Yeah.
something in the pathway to whimsy is always through the door of authenticity. Like you're not
Mm,
going to get to whimsy unless you're authentic. So if you end up going like waving your arms and not being authentic, that's a party clown. That's the one that makes balloon
yeah.
animals at your party.
Yeah.
But the idea of like true whimsy is someone who's deeply curious about why things are connected, is spent a fair amount of time of personal introspection, and then takes a genuine interest in the people around him. And
Yeah.
then they don't just think about stuff, they get stuff done. They go get the giraffe.
Yeah. I love it. I was thinking about, how can we be joyful and exhibit whimsy and in moments where there's so much tension. And I think that point you made about curiosity is kind of a linchpin to that, right? Like
Yeah.
when we can
You
be
get
authentically curious about where people are and how they're feeling and what the tensions are that they're experiencing or the anxiety that they're feeling, it's like a doorway.
Yeah, so instead of asking like, how are you? And then somebody says, fine, how are you? And then I say, fine, which is just, there's nothing wrong with that. It's just a North American greeting. That's what we
Yeah.
do. But what if you were to say, what does it feel like to be you right now? And while you're thinking
Mm,
about that, let me tell you what it feels like to be me, 100% anticipation and about 80% insecurity. Isn't that a
mm,
beautiful way to signal to somebody, let's have a real conversation? Is
yeah.
that what does it feel like to be you? And if they're kind of searching for words a little bit to say, well, like, does it feel like really ambiguous right now? Does it like, how do you deal with ambiguity? And they go, oh, that nails it. That's what it feels like, ambiguous.
Mhm.
Then don't make it about you. I remember when I was thought with somebody ambiguous, but just make it about you. So when was the last time it felt like this? Do you remember another data point, another time where you felt that things were as ambiguous or as painful or as joyful or as
Yeah.
whatever? And if we can help people find their way back, if you lose your keys, what do? You say, where was the last place I
Trace
saw
my
this?
steps.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, trace your steps. So if you've lost your joy, let's trace your steps. Let's see where it is. Maybe it's still sitting right there.
Yeah.
Um, Instead of saying, well, I'm just going to gut it out and lean forward. And that's noble as well, but it doesn't necessarily help connect the dots between what you're feeling and what happened. And I'm not saying get wrapped around in this endless cycle of introspection, but we might go back to the scene of the crime to where you felt unwanted and to say, like, there's a theme in my life, which is that people that I thought wanted me actually didn't want me. And I'm not the
Mhm.
victim on this thing, nor am I the hero. But to be a participant, I actually need to see it so I can
Yeah.
understand it. So I can maybe, if faith guides your steps, take it to God and say, how can you help me fix this thing?
How can I learn to walk through it? Yeah.
Or take it to a counselor and then take it to
Right.
God. But just
Right.
like that idea, let's find knowledgeable people. And in the marketplace, that is among your superpowers. You know who to call for what you need. And rather than going it alone, you say, like, no, 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 let's get somebody who's really good at that. So don't
Yeah.
rely on like amateur night where you call your best friend
Right.
and say whatever, because that's like rock, paper, scissors. They don't know what they're doing. No, I
Yeah.
wouldn't know what I'm doing, but I
Yeah.
can say, hey, could we merge in 911 right now?
Yeah.
Could you call me at 10:15 tomorrow morning? And probably that conversation at 10:17 is, hey, are there some people that are really safe in your life that are knowledgeable? Is there a counselor you've ever spoken to? Have you made, took a look at some resources that are near you. These are free. And would it be worth going over there and talk? How do you think that would turn out? Instead of
Yeah.
saying, well, what you ought to do is, and people who are in the marketplace, I'll say, you do this, you do this, you do this. But
Yeah.
maybe just take that down a notch and to say, what would it feel like? Like, what would be the scariest part about like this
Mhm.
option? What would be
Yeah.
the scariest? See, is that something you want to walk through instead of yanking people's arm out of their socket to get them to your great idea? Just like maybe throw an arm around them and say, what if we walk towards that great idea together?
So good. So good. Well, Bob, I know this book is really well suited for daily practice, right? And
Yeah.
it made me wonder, what is your daily practice to get to the right place with the Lord every day before you
Oh,
start your
yeah.
day?
I'm a note taker. I'll take notes from our conversation. I'll do from the one I just had and the one I'm gonna have. If you want to live a noteworthy life, like don't trust your memory because it's like a bad friend. It's not there when you need it. And so I take lots and lots of notes. And then some people in their faith traditions have what are called quiet times. And
Yeah.
that feels like timeout to me. That would make me nuts. And so I bailed on those 30 years ago, and mine are really loud. I'll take everything that I took notes on the day before. I'll try to make some sense of it. I'll try to say, like, how does that actually mesh? Or like what Paul said
Mm,
is check everything against scripture. So
yeah.
I reading the Bible would be a zero for me. Like to just read it, page one, page two. That would feel like this, like a bunch of hard pronounced names. But if I'm actually in search of an answer to a question I'm trying to figure out, I'm trying to spin that puzzle piece, then it actually matters. So this
Yeah.
idea some people use in faith communities of dwelling in Christ, that's what it means for me. It's just like
Yeah.
to get in there, spin that puzzle piece, and then don't make it like brain candy, just like roll it out. Because I'm usually taking note of that because it connects with something that's for real in my life right now. Somebody
Right.
who's eating a pill, or somebody who's been really generous, or somebody who's whatever, but like then go do something about it. I
Yeah.
probably send 5 or 10 notes every morning to people in no particular order. I just like somebody comes to mind. I know it's their bar mitzvah or their birthday or their whatever. Just drop them a note. And it's not like they don't have anything I want. But
Yeah.
that idea of just like some people have these gratitude kind of practices they've described to me. I don't know. I'm just a note practice. I like just drop people
Yeah.
notes. Say I'm thinking about you. Maybe point something out that you've seen in them. If there's something you need to own up to, like drop that. Just say like, oh man, I really blew that. Would you give me a do-over? Because I'm thinking about it still, how I really fumbled that one big time.
Yeah.
Um, so there's something about just clearing the decks. There's something really cleansing about that and lets you not have to carry that forward. Because if you don't clear the decks, you'll have more luggage than Delta Airlines. I mean, you're just gonna if you've ever been pulling a piece of luggage and then the handle breaks and then you have to carry the piece of luggage because there's no way to like pull it and
Yeah.
have any other hold points so you hug it. And I've always thought of people that if we don't deal with our ish, that what we need to do is we end up hugging all the luggage we don't have a handle on. And then somebody else, we meet them and they're hugging all their stuff too. And so all the ish meets all the ish, and the
Yeah.
people meet, all the stuff meets. And so what I
Yes.
wanted to do is have that would be the kind of thing I would be musing about in the morning and maybe writing about and just say, man, I
Yeah.
just got to get a handle on it. I want to
Yeah.
understand where is that. A really great friend, Mike Foster, wrote a book called Seven Primal Questions. And the premise
Yes.
of it is that he would say that if there's behaviors, they're always linked to emotions, and emotions are always linked to unmet needs. So
Yeah.
if you had something that was happening, a behavior, you're blowing somebody off or being overly vigilant about something, that's probably that behavior is linked to an emotion, a lack of safety, feeling abandonment, like whatever it is. And
Right.
that is probably linked to an unmet need. I just need a really good friend. And so
Yeah.
that idea, if you follow that, then you could say, what if you and I are just the safest people in the world? Like we can just say between Ann and Bob, they don't have it right, but they're in the zip code of safe.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think there's something really beautiful and noble about that.
There really is, Bob. There really is. Well, thank you so much. It's always fun
Oh,
to
so
talk to
fun.
you. I'm
Thanks
so
for letting me
excited about the
on.
book. And
Uh,
we will have it links in the show notes for folks to pre-order the book.
uh,
And I think it would make a great stocking stuffer this year for all the folks
uh,
that you love. So
get a big
um,
stocking, right? You need
that's
just
right.
book size.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right, Bob. Always a pleasure. Thank you so much
Thanks a
for joining
million.
us today. Take
Bye.
care. Bye. Well, was that fun? You know what? My observation of Bob is that there is so much wisdom packed into every minute of every conversation with him. I've listened back to that episode a few times now, and every time I take away something new. So that's just a little hint. You might want to listen back to this one a couple of times to really get the most out of it. But I have tried my best to boil off my top few takeaways. So here we go. The first takeaway, I admitted to Bob that the idea of whimsy sounded a little frivolous to me. And I love that the entire conversation really led me to a place of saying, that whimsy is so much more than something frivolous. It's actually not at all frivolous. I really loved when Bob said that whimsy is like this veneer of joy that sits over top of a mile of strategy. And I just thought, what a beautiful way to think about how we as leaders show up. He talked about the pathway to whimsy always being through the doorway of authenticity. Like, we're not supposed to be party clowns. We're not supposed to be like silly for silly sake, but true whimsy is really rooted in curiosity. It can really be an important part of our approach to life and to business and to leadership. And I found myself wondering, what if you had a leader, you worked for a leader who was full of fun and authenticity and wonder and curiosity and joy and availability? And then I started to wonder, what if I was a leader that was full of fun and authenticity and wonder and curiosity and joy and generosity and availability? And I really felt convicted and challenged and called up in a good way to those are characteristics that I want to embody in my leadership. That's just the first takeaway. You could tell there's a lot in this conversation. My second big takeaway, I loved when we were talking about the concept of will it work and will it last? And the idea that there are lots of things out there that we could work on that will work, but will they really last? And this challenge that Bob had heard from someone else about spending 15% of his day planning for what he will be remembered for, and then living very strategically from this. We all could come up with cool ideas like the pet rock, which worked, but arguably did not last. So how do we focus, really focus on the things that, not just the things that are going to work, but the things that are going to last, and the ways that we can spend our time and our talent against things that are really going to last and make an impact. And then the third takeaway, toward the end of the conversation, we talked about that it's not really our job as leaders to talk people into something or out of something. Our job is to love people, and it's God's job to let people know who He is. That was such a freeing idea. We just show up, we show up fully, and we let God do what God's going to do. It's really a beautiful picture of how we work with Him as leaders in the work that we do. So I have a two-part challenge for you. We're closing in on the end of the year. So I have a two-part challenge for you. The first part is, what would it look like if you took an inventory of the things you're working on and you asked yourself, which of these things are truly going to last? We oftentimes inventory the things we're working on and ask, is this working? Will this work? Could this work? And we focus on those things. But the next level here is, which of the things are going to last? And how do we prioritize those things, and maybe even walk away from some things that they're working, or they might work, or they will work, but they're really not going to last. They're not going to have lasting impact. And how do we refocus our priorities that way? And then the second piece is to actually step back and consider this space of whimsy that we talked about today, and ask yourself, which of the characteristics that we talked about do you want to most work on as a leader? Do you want to work on being more fun, more authentic, more curious? Do you want to work on your curiosity? Do you want to work on being more joyful? Do you want to focus on being more generous? Do you want to be more available? Don't pick all of these. It can be really overwhelming. But what one or two of them do you most want to improve on or grow in as a leader? And then allow yourself to think about a couple things that you intentionally could do in order to move that forward. I would love to talk to you about that. If you have some ideas, if you need some ideas, if you want to share ideas and bounce ideas off of each other, that would be so fun and would fulfill something for me about learning from others and being more curious, even as I continue to grow as a leader. And I'm going to take these two exercises. Each year I do a bit of a look back on the previous year and what went well, what should I start, stop, continue? I've used all kinds of different ways to look at the past year and then thought about planning for the next year. But I'm going to change that up a little bit this year. And among a couple of other things, I'm going to add these two exercises. Will it work and will it last? And which of these characteristics where am I strong and where do I want to grow? I'm going to add those into mine. I want to encourage you to do the same. Okay. I hope you've already ordered Chasing Whimsy, 365 Days of Possibility. I hope that you can get it in time for Christmas and put it in the stockings of lots of people that you love. If you haven't had a chance yet to order it, please hop on over to the show notes. There'll be a link to order the book. Hey, if you love The Faith-Driven Leader, even if you just like The Faith-Driven Leader, I would so appreciate your support. I'd love if you would like and subscribe and share what you're hearing. Give me some feedback, share some thoughts, share some observations. We'd love to hear from you. So thank you again, Bob Goff. You are always such a joy to have on the show. And friends, we'll see you next time on The Faith-Driven Leader.